Had a strong example of a man, Indian chap, older man, with a ministry last night, and it will be tonight too. Not that unusual in prophetic sort of ministry, Pentecostal. He would, just about everyone in the group, probably 50 people, that were audience, nearly all of them, probably 40 of them, came forward to stand up, and he would go from person to person and speak to each for about a minute or so and tell them something about their life, and encourage them, typically, of course, in some spiritual way. So he comes to me and says, well, the things that stand out, very briefly. I in fact did not stand. I was sitting. I was more of an observer, but since I was sitting in the front, I was virtually in the line, so to speak, of people that were just standing there waiting to be ministered to, if you like. And he treated me as if I was. And I accepted this, of course. I mean, I'm cautious with people's ministries. I don't embrace them as being valid instantly, and I was still very much an observer at this point. Because I was trying to see if each time he spoke to someone, from the little I knew about them, whether what he said was pertinent or valid, appropriate, or a shot in the dark, quite honestly. I wanted to know if the ministry was genuine, didn't I? Anyway, he reaches forth his hand, so I reach his and I hold him firmly, and I encourage him in what he's doing, so to speak. I give him complete eye contact, and it's a welcome. He's come to bless, after all. And he quickly mentions back trouble, lower back. Wow, that's been the major problem in my life. He also said your health has been good. And of course that is true. 74, I'm still extremely healthy. Life is good. And I don't even have back trouble these days, partly because I'm very careful of it. Very rarely do I get a big reminder, And he's saying lower back, something like 3. In a sense, he's saying cogs, 3 points. He's saying in a sort of roundabout way, disc trouble. Not mentioning the word disc, I don't think, but now that's key. Let me pause a sec. He's saying 40 years ago, something as if there's been a determination in the last 40 years to do something. And he says, in some sense, it's going to come to fullness. And it's going to involve travel, and for some reason I've got Israel on my mind. You're going to Israel. But in other words, he was saying, I don't know what that is. Now, it occurs to me now, I'm speaking it to you here in this recording, that Israel might be symbolic rather than literal. That it's the obviously I have a bit to do with Messianic Christians, quite a bit to do, don't I? more than most Sunday Christians would have. And I'm acceptable there, even though I'm clearly a Sunday Christian much of the time as well, because I'm not an in member, really. You know, I'm full on when it comes to the Penti church that I belong to on Sunday, but I'm an observer everywhere, in fairness, even at the Penti church, as you can see from my analysis of this chap with his ministry last night. But I'm more into the Sunday church than, of course, than I am Saturday. But Israel may be, I don't know, was it definite enough what he said? I'm tall. We know that tall people tend to have back trouble. If it were a shot in the dark, it's a good shot. It's a fairly reliable one. More to the point, though, many people, I won't say all, but many people were greatly moved by the experience of his brief ministry with them. And of course, it's said out loud. It's not just in private, quietly out there. Yeah, everyone's listening to. He's speaking into the mic. He's, in my case, he's holding the mic in his left hand and he's holding my right hand. And when he first comes, I'm wondering whether to get to my feet or not. And I normally do if I'm embracing someone. But I'm cautious, I'm holding off. And that, of course, it's likely to influence his delivery, his ministry to me. He will pick up this man's cautious with me. He will have picked that up. He could tell from my worship, I'm the noisiest person in the room by a mile, even without a microphone, And I don't use a microphone, of course, it'd be madness. I'd deafen the place. I'm obviously a full-on something person here, you know what I mean? And at the same time, you'll know I'm not specifically a referred to part of Jeff's ministry. And he relates to Jeff. He's known Jeff a long time, and Jeff takes him as profoundly significant in his life, because this Indian chap, if you like, prophesied over him long before his ministry took off, and accurately, astonishingly accurately. And I mean, Jeff does have an extraordinary ministry. I mean, wow. A deliverance ministry, as it's called in Penti circles. And I mean, he's set up this huge church. And from it, of course, we got several churches around the world. I think it's 3 in Pakistan, 1 in Africa, and the children's home there, and I don't know what else, Is in touch with about 10,000 members in all. Only 150 of them, say, in Hamilton here, New Zealand, in the home church, so to speak. Let me pause a sec. So what is this ministry? Well, the key thing in the theme of his sermon, so to speak, delivery, is that we should be doing what Jesus does. It's very much, an action ministry, a sort of fundamentalist in a more fundamentalist way than fundamentalism. This is not some theology. Not at all when I reflect on it. I mean, we're not talking about the blood and all that sort of stuff and sacrifice and what it all means or anything like that. It's just saying, why aren't you doing what Jesus did? What did Jesus do? That was less emphasized. But why aren't you being what Jesus was being? It certainly includes the miraculous. It's sort of emphasized very much you should be out there healing. It didn't particularly emphasize you should be giving prophetic word, although that was certainly the climax of the evening, his prophetic word to each individual person. Because, of course, it was individual. And in an essence, it occurs to me he got that right, that Jesus is individually relating. I mean, we know he's talking to crowds like Sermon on the Mount, but all the things that count are an individual talk to someone, aren't they? He might be talking to Peter or one of his disciples in general, or he might be talking to someone he's healing. And he took the example of the widow whose children were about to be, sold into slavery to pay her debts, and she had no food, and, the widow's cruise. And she had to do something. She was told, in effect, to use her wherewithal, get the boys in, and she was about to lose them, get them to get all the jars from the neighborhood, and now fill them up. And then she was about to go and sell to pay her debts and therefore free her sons so that they could stay with her as free sons with her, not into slavery for paying the debt. And she'd have enough to live on through whatever the famine or drought was that they were suffering. She was told, in effect, to act, to do, to exercise what ability she had, to do it with others, namely her sons. In a sense, put a trust in what she could do, and put a trust in us, in others, her sons, of course, the ones that were just near her, to achieve it. Quite a thing I recognized in his talk was that God puts his trust in us. When I think of the story of Israel and perhaps our own, it's incredibly disappointing. Israel's unfaithful. But he puts his trust in this chosen people. We do that, We choose a loved one, or one we choose to love, and we choose to put our trust in them. We don't necessarily have terribly good grounds for doing this, and we can be wrong, Goodness, I've been wrong 3 times at least, where they've just, not rewarded your trust. In the long run, they've gone. And you feel desolate and desperate. And I won't go into that again. But, I have been saying in recent recordings, 1 or 2, the disappointment to God. Ingratitude, disappointment. Ingratitude of those that he's put his trust in. That they've so disappointed that trust. And they go off like the prodigal, but they may come back. They may come back. may not. My first one hasn't. She still, I won't say hates me, but from her perspective, so wounded, she can't forgive him. She doesn't want his contact. She doesn't want to repair. It's a terrible state, isn't it? That the ingratitude is such that you don't want to put it right. Or at least she doesn't want to at times, and that wrecks it, of course, so you don't dare contact her for a long time, you know what I mean? She's so safe she doesn't want to know you. Wow. When you think how much you both put into it, and they come to a point where they just do not want to know you anymore. That's terrible. I just find that terrible. May I never be like that with anyone, Father. Oh, please guard me from that. Perhaps I need to be guarded from not doing that, but, you know, because some people can be so harmful, can't they? But it seems so tragic to love someone, to have them as so meaningful, and then hold them in a relationship where they're no longer meaningful. I really find that the tragedy of all existence. And I think God feels that about Israel. Now, I mentioned Israel as being so important so important from my narrow individualism here, his ministry to me, if you like. And I suppose Israel symbolizes this unfaithfulness of one that you put your trust in. You know he's right. The wonderful thing about God is that he chooses to put his trust in us. And really, it's so unwarranted in a way, isn't it? In that we're not able to respond as we so should to him putting his trust in us. Wow, I think he's got a point. Now I reflect upon, I'm so cautious, you know. I didn't give him a fair run because I was so not putting my trust in his ministry. I don't want to put my trust in people in a sense, of course. I'm not out to worship their ministry. I'm not out to be ministered to, quite honestly. And yet, of course, one so wants God to minister to one. It's just that one has all one's defences up against, well, dare I say it, the ingenuine. And there were various features about this man that repelled me, of course. Bit pompous, bit of a culture clash. I mean, I'm used to India, and he's southern India, of course. Less used to older southern Indian men, but I've had some very good experience, like with my recent father-in-law, Indian chap, Mohan. Incredibly fine man, as far as I can see. I'm sure he's not perfect, but yeah, good chap. But there are cultural things that put me off. The dominance, you know, I'm teaching, I'm right, authority, I'm the father figure, and although I obviously embrace God as Heavenly Father, I'm incredibly cautious of people that take a dominant, forceful, fatherly role, especially if it means me in sort of playing submission to it, being taught of it. If you like, I resist other fathers like the plague. God I embrace as Heavenly Father, no one else. So it's very hard for people to have an effective ministry to me, really, because I'm treating them as an equal, and dare I say it, against my reputation, but I'm treating them as inferior, not as ministering from above to me, but, attempting to minister where they don't have it to me. But I don't want to dismiss them. I don't want to dismiss, if you like, the treasure of ministry that they truly have, if they have it. But I'm very cautious to put my faith in the fact that they have it. I'm very cautious in being influenced. I protect myself majorly against what may be wrong influence. But of course what he's saying in this sermon, if you like, was something rather lovely and outstanding, and he knew it's outstanding. We're always talking about putting our faith in God, but in a sense, more importantly, it's that he puts his faith in us. He trusts in us to give us practice at being trusted. And dare I say it, it can't pay off in the full way that it should. This wonderful being God chooses to put his trust in us, who are so inexperienced and so unreliable. And he does. Hey, he's got something, I think that's the blessing. I think I'm feeling blessed now. Whether he's got, his word right to me or not, he's attempted to. He's gone out on an incredible limb with every individual he talked to. And we're talking about, 30 or 40 people he'd just given a word to, straight off from one to the other, to the next, minute or two with that one, minute or two. And some people are profoundly responding, of course, in tears and, emotion, and, they're struck by, this was an experience I didn't expect, a personal experience. So a wonderful blessing of ministry. And it is what Jesus is reported to be doing, isn't it? Talks to a woman at the well. Yes, you're right. You have had, how many husbands? 6, is it? And the one that thou hast now is not thy husband. He speaks straight into the reality of her life. How can he know this sort of thing? That's what you want to respond with it. Has he got it right? And how has he got it right? And isn't this, wow, this does look right. And of course, when someone does that, you're just so open to be influenced by what they also suggest. Which, let's put our faith in him. He, in good faith, is trying to encourage your ministry, your closeness to God, and your way ahead, and trying to give you some direction. That, he assumes you're there because you need direction, you're wanting it, you're seeking it, and he's wanting to minister to it. He's wanting to be the voice of God, speaking and guiding your life, loving and caring for you. And, there's me, and I'm guilty of not putting my trust in him when he's about to deliver a word to me. And We're cautious of putting our trust in people, aren't we? I mean, rightly so, because our trust is really in God, not in the vagaries of the transitory life that we're going through. We're so wanting to reach beyond that, into the reliability of our Heavenly Father. It blocks God working through the transitory, and yet of course it's the transitory that he's using. But coming back from it for a moment, how wonderful to think for a moment, yes, we at our best, when we're at our best, we're choosing to put our trust in people, that they may flourish and prosper. And often they do, of course. But we should perhaps refuse to be disappointed when this wasn't in this ministry, but when they don't respond as fully as one would perhaps hope. Doesn't mean to say that the whole thing hasn't been a wonderful blessing to them and to us in return. Only that perhaps it's not complete, and we always long for it to be, well, so earnestly wonderful back. And perhaps it is, and in the world of the transitory and uncertainty, well, our appreciation of their response is marked, is harmed a little. We are here to look beyond the transitory, beyond the variability, to a singularity of perfect relationship with our Heavenly Father and with each other, all of his children that he loves and we come into a loving relationship with too. Thank you, Heavenly Father. Just love you, Lord. May we, Lord, may I, may we, may you recognize that our Heavenly Father has put his trust in us. God, how wonderful. How incredibly good. What an amazing thing for our infinite Heavenly Father to be doing. We do that with our kids though, don't we? We do it with the ones we love. We choose to trust them and love them. So let me say in a more fundamental way than some description about what Jesus did as he, supposedly walked around Galilee and so on, and Jerusalem. Let me say that we should do what fundamentally God is seen to be doing in the story, which is to be putting his trust in us. Love calls out love. And it's that putting his trust in that is his love for us. We've done it with those around us. Sometimes we feel we've had pretty poor returns, sometimes wonderful returns. Overall, we keep trusting, because that's who we are, children of our Heavenly Father. He trusts, we trust, And we are learning to trust well, and to put a trust in others that will weather the storms, weather their variability, their inconstancy, because they're children. Of course they can't respond as well as, well, they can't respond perfectly because they're children. They're learning to respond. So we forgive them. We so forgive those that we put our trust in and that fail to give even perhaps the same degree of trust back. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for your trust in us, your incredible loving goodness. Thank you for this ministry this chap has. Let me not see the faults, Father. Let me major on appreciating the blessing in each life around me. Let me put my trust in, though that trust won't be necessarily returned in the way I expected, hoped for. But we keep hoping, and our hope brings them through. Thank you, beautiful one. Thank you, Heavenly Father.